The SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings. Netsparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. Netsparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. LogRhythm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns in application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logRhythm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. This is a technical segment with no stranger to the show, Ferruh Mavituna from Netsparker. Ferruh, welcome to the show.
It's like we should almost bring him on as a co-host.
He is pretty much a regular co-host. We love Ferruh. We love your content, which is why we like to bring him back all the time, and especially for technical segments like we're going to be talking about this evening. So, Ferruh, how have you been?
All good, yeah, thank you. Busy, and it's also nice to do some technical stuff, not just talking.
Absolutely. I know as, in my role here at Security Weekly, we do business stuff, and then it's nice to settle back in and do some technical stuff as well. So what are we talking about this evening?
Right, we will be talking about exploiting web application vulnerabilities in an out-of-band fashion. So, some of them or most of them will be stuff that you wouldn't able to exploit normally, and you will need some sort of setup. We will be briefly touching second-order vulnerabilities, but mostly exploiting stuff in an out-of-band way. So not just through the web application as you normally would do, but using DNS servers and by other means.
I like the terminology, I know I was talking with Robert from your organization, the second-order vulnerability. Can you explain to our audience what you mean by second-order vulnerabilities?
Right. Second order is, for example, in a normal SQL injection or in a normal cross-site scripting, what you expect is, just to repeat, I will start from SQL injection because it's the usage is generally used in that context. Mm-hmm. So in a normal SQL injection, what you do, you put an injection forward, and it just goes to a SQL query. Then you have the injection, which is very straightforward. Which is we do exploit every day, we do see every time. In a second order SQL injection, what happens is you put some sort of data into the application, then it stores it in the database. Then later on, application takes that data, and in the initial storage, there is no SQL injection. But later on, that piece of data is used to construct a separate SQL query, whether it's happening as a result of you doing something in the application, or maybe in the backend, they are doing the batch processing, doing some other stuff, and taking all these pieces and construct new SQL queries. But then when the SQL injection happens in that second point, we refer to that like second order SQL injection. And this gets tricky because when you try to exploit it, if you just put your exploitation, it might not work on the second order SQL injection, or you might not even aware when it worked. So you need to kind of prepare your payload in a way that, it will go into somewhere, then it will get out again, and it will be part of a new SQL query in somewhere else. And I need to be informed. Yeah. And that information bit is mostly talked about out of band, and that process where the SQL query happens in not the immediate place, but in a second or third or fourth, whatever, in another, after many layers or many systems after when the SQL injection happens, we call that the second order.
Yeah, no, and I like that description a lot, and I think it's important to know that there's a second SQL query that happens that allows you to take advantage of it. So do you have a demonstration or example of this particular attack for this evening?
I do. Actually, what I intend to do, I will show a couple of things. I will show two, live demo of exploitation, this kind of vulnerabilities. But what I'm also going to show how a penetration tester, how a tester can set up their environment from a DNS server and then they construct the payload, do all that, and put all together kind of how can you utilize out-of-band exploitation in your own pen testing or on your bug bounty hunting, whatever you are doing, really.
Fantastic. Can't wait. Let's get into it.
Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do, I'll share my screen.
Okay,
and
perfect.
We will take it from there. The rest of it will be presentation / demo, etc., etc. Let's do that.
When you do share your screen, for just make sure that your fonts are, as big as you can make them, so people can see them.
Right, I will do that.
Awesome.
So,
I like the shark. That's awesome.
So I guess these fonts are not big enough right now.
Yeah. You need to make your yeah.
Okay,
you're in there.
let's do that. It should be somewhere here. There we go. Let's do something like this. How are they now? Better?
Bigger.
Bigger. Yeah. Okay. Now that's big.
Yeah, that's better. That's perfect.
There we go.
Okay, good.
I love on Linux that's just Control Shift plus.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that great? And Paul likes it big.
Right.
Except for the first time, he'd rather. No, never mind.
We already talked about second order and out of band briefly, so I'm not going to repeat them. But it's important to understand finding second order, not always, but especially if we're looking at something and trying to exploit it by out-of-band means, then you need some sort of structure. You cannot just do it. You need an extra server accessible to your target website, mostly on the internet, or if you're on a private network, it should be accessible from your target, on the same network, something like that. And it can be, depending on what you're exploiting in a general terms. When we say out of band, it can be exploitation of many things. But in this context, I will be focusing on web applications. And in web applications, we generally use either an HTTP listener, just effectively a web server, or a DNS server. And I will briefly explain more why, DNS server is better most of the time. So we talked about the second order and a SQL injection example. Another very, very popular example is blind cross-site scripting. This is where web application terminology gets, kind of random. Even though this is effectively the same kind of vulnerability, we generally refer this as blind cross-site scripting. But if you say blind SQL injection, it doesn't really mean the same thing. It means kind of different. So it's one of those things, even after so many years, we don't have a real standard for it. And when you talk to other pen testers, everyone gets the different thing when you just say blind SQL injection. So let's talk about cross-site scripting, and I will explain that blind cross-site scripting and how we're going to exploit that. So in a normal cross-site scripting, what we get, we send something, we receive something. If in that particular page we are getting a JavaScript execution, we're good. We got a cross-site scripting. Another popular one is stored cross-site scripting, which is you put something into the database, and when another user visits that page, the code gets executed. I'm not going to get into DOM-based XSS. It's irrelevant in this context. So the way it works, attacker immediately receives the feedback. So it worked or it didn't. And then the impact of cross-site scripting, as we know, the most common impact, there are various others, but the most common impact that you can steal the session of whomever you are attacking to. So if you have a cross-site scripting on, let's say, a forum application, and if you send your payload to the forum admin, then once that get executed, you can steal the cookie values and you can just put them on your browser, and now you are the admin. So it can be very dangerous. We have seen cross-site scripting to lead very, very critical hacks. So blind XSS, what's the difference? So imagine a scenario where you are registering new users, right? A common web application. And there is the admin panel. But this admin panel can be only, let's say, accessible from certain IP addresses, or this admin panel that you never seen, you don't have an access. So the question becomes, if there's a cross-site scripting on that admin panel while listing all the users, first, how can you find it? Secondly, how can you exploit that? And the exploitation changes. For example, if that admin panel is accessible over the internet, it might be easy to exploit. But also there is a possibility that admin panel is only accessible from a certain IP addresses. So let's say you are Facebook, and we have actually seen, I think, this vulnerability existed in PayPal. I'm pretty sure I remember that one.
I think I do too. I think you're right.
Yeah, right. So for example, you have PayPal, and you have your support team. You have various administrators who checks tickets, who checks accounts, who does so many things. So obviously, most of the attackers don't have access to those places. But what they can do, they can blindly send XSS payloads, and they hope to get an execution when an admin, when a technical support person or whomever in the backend office of PayPal or whatever the company is, enters that particular page, you can hope that that cross-site scripting will get executed on their browser. Now, the second problem is, once that executed, how do you know that actually successfully executed? Because you did the exploit, you sent the payload, right? But you don't know whether it ever got executed or not. And even if it did, you need to have a way to be informed about it. So that's what we try to accomplish in here. How can we send an exploit, and once it gets executed, even in a kind of strict environment, strict network, we want to be informed. And before going further, you might think like, okay, let's say we got that execution, but I'm not an admin, or for example, you can say that's an admin place, and I don't have access to that because I don't have that IP address, etc. Remember that cross-site scripting runs on the browser, and you can do multiple things. You can use a tool such as Beef, where you can get like interactive execution. That effectively means when you run your cross-site scripting, got executed, you can actually dynamically see what they are seeing, or you can actually start making requests on their behalf. So even though you don't have direct access to that admin panel, through the cross-site scripting, you almost like create a tunnel. Mm-hmm. And even though your IP address cannot access to that, because they can get out and reach to your command server that you are pushing, XSS payload and commands on real time, they will execute every single one of them. So it's like getting a reverse shell rather than just directly, getting the shell on the box. So that's, so the possibility of exploitation is very real, and you can do it. And there are various other ways. One of the things I have done in the past, I've actually developed an HTTP proxy that runs on your computer. And then let's say you can put any tool that accepts an HTTP proxy. This can be Nikto, like a scanner, right? Or even Netsparker as a web scanner. Or this can be as simple as your browser. And then this actual native HTTP proxy will convert all of your HTTP requests into XSS payloads or traffic, and then it will push it to your victim. And then your victim will execute all of the HTTP requests and will pass the responses, and your proxy will just pass them downstream to your client. So when you launch your browser, you're actually using your browser as that person, and that person might be accessing internal web servers that are only accessible by that person behind, firewall, and no access to outside world, no access to no internet-facing servers, and you can still see the results and you can still push commands.
Hold on, wait a minute, Ferruh. So you're saying basically through a cross-site scripting, you can turn the victim's browser into an HTTP proxy?
Correct. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And the good bit of it, once you send the command, it will execute the commands within that domain context.
Right.
So you are an admin on that domain, you have cookies. So once you say, okay, once you type /admin on your browser, that /admin request will be done by your victim. Then the response will be loaded and come back to you, and then it will be loaded on your browser. So you will almost like mirroring.
If I'm the victim and you're using my browser as a proxy, if I'm logged into, let's say, my WordPress site already, and you as the attacker access /admin on my website, you're already in. There's no password involved, right? Like I just log in. It's already logged in. You're reusing my cookies.
Works. There is one catch. It works for the same domain, because whatever the domain your cross-site scripting got executed, you still cannot get out of that.
Oh, okay. I got you. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Unless, of course, it's cross-site request forgery.
Yeah, unless you're bypassing same origin, but yeah.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
you can obviously, you can do cross-site request forgery, but it's still obviously you can't do same origin policy bypass.
Right, okay.
But the cross-site request forgery is actually quite interesting. If you think about, imagine that, let's say you are working for a company, so you know the internal web applications quite well. And you know maybe a cross-site scripting here and there, and you know a couple of cross-site request forgeries here and there. So what you can actually do, and you got fired, you are granted or whatever, you want to, get back at them. And what you can do then, you can actually exploit a cross-site scripting, and you can also do follow-up cross-site request forgery attacks to other domains in that network. And the key bit in that, this shows the fact, I've seen so many times that internal applications, just because they're only accessible within the internal network, lacking so many basic security features like anti-CSRF protection. And though CSRF itself, because it's executed on the client, it doesn't matter it's an internal application or external application. If you know where the CSRF located, you can exploit it. Because you're not actually making the request, the victim will be making the request who is already in that network.
That's awesome.
Right. So that's the basics of blind cross-site scripting. And the problem from an attacker pen tester point of view, as I said, it gets tricky. How do you know it got executed? How can you prepare the payload? To be honest, the payload preparation generally boils down to brute forcing. So you try to create XSS payload as generic as possible. So it will almost like work in majority of the positions in an HTML output. So it can be within a JavaScript, it can be in a text area, it can be in certain places. So you want to, craft your payload in a way, hopefully it will bypass everything, or you have to spam a little bit with lots of different payloads and hope one of them will actually work. But I will mostly focus on, now in the demo time, I will focus on, okay, let's say we got that far. How can I we got that far. We got our cross-site scripting got executed. How can I get informed about it? So, as a penetration test, so I need to know whether it worked or not. So let's do that. What we got. So here's the theory. Before launching my web server, let's go back to, close that. So let's go to my example. So here is an example. I'm making fonts bigger. So this is a registration page, and we also put like an admin page. This is as simple as it gets. So let's make an example. Any register, let's say new user something, and then we enter the password. So let's look at the admin section. And let's say, if you can see, on the left side, this is the attacker. Let's consider it that way. This is the attacker who can only register. So attacker is seeing the registration, right? And this is the admin. This is Firefox. This is Chrome. Chrome on the left, which is the attacker, and Firefox on the right are admin. So admin logs in. Okay, who registered to my website recently? I can see new user. Okay, and attacker can try something else, register, and admin will see that. So the idea is, okay, can we put a cross-site scripting in here, right? So what we want to do, in normal scenarios, what we generally see, we put a cross-site scripting in, and we immediately get the output, and we get that alert pop-up. Then we craft a payload, then we send it to the victim, and then victim clicks, etc., etc. But in this scenario, what we're going to do, we're going to put the cross-site scripting in, then the admin will execute it. Now, what we try to accomplish, once it got executed, we want to be informed that it got executed. And the way we will be doing it is by crafting a payload that will make a request to our own web server, right? So this is very straightforward. It's slightly easier than SQL injection exploitation in that sense. So what I'm going to do, again, let's go to our example. So prior to the presentation, I prepared a very small, let's zoom in a little bit more, right? A very simple example, right? So this is attacker.com, and we got an exploit.js, okay? So we type this JavaScript, and JavaScript says, I am the attacker. It just creates an XML HTTP request, so it will make an HTTP request to attacker.com, which as an attacker I control, and then to a place called log, and then it will steal the cookie. So we need to encode it so it doesn't get lost during transmission, and then we steal the cookie. Well, that's the whole idea, right? If we steal the cookie, we can use it, etc. But as I said, this is just to demonstrate in real world. If you don't have direct access to admin interface, you want more interactive XSS exploitation, which can be done by many tools, but Beef is extremely popular on that. Mm-hmm. But in this example, if you can access the admin, it's enough to just steal the cookies. At this point, what we want to get, we want to understand that our attack got executed in an out-of-band fashion. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I need to do before doing this exploit, I need to ensure that I have a web server that is working. So here is my web server. It's very straightforward, nothing fancy. You can even do this with Netcat, doesn't matter. Just listen the port and HTTP request will come in and will be listed. Mm-hmm. And then we go ahead and put our exploit in. So again, this is a very simple, straightforward exploit, nothing fancy. So we put it in the username field, and we put something into the password so it gets registered. And as I said, in a real application, possibly you want to try 3, 4, 5, maybe even more payloads to ensure that you got the right context to execute it. And again, you want to do it in a way, once it got executed, it's not obvious to the victim. So you want it mostly in background. It's happening on the background. So, okay, let's put our listener on the right. Let's do our attack. So we've done the attack. No, nothing happening yet. So let's say the very next day or very next hour, but not necessarily immediately, an admin logged in and they just entered this page, okay? So they press enter. This is what they are seeing. And on the left, as you can see, our web server got the cookie. So we got the session and now the game is over.
The time delay is basically you're waiting for an admin to log into the system, correct?
That's correct. Okay. So again, in practice, when I generally do this exploitation, the way I used to do, you generally write a web server with a simple functionality like, okay, notify me, generally email or, maybe a quick IM or something like that. Notify me when this happens. Because you don't want to just sit there and look at one screen and see someone comes in. Right. But you can also think about triggering that behavior by social engineering. Call the technical support. Tell them you're going to problem on your account.
I was just thinking that, it could be a week or two before I log into the admin interfaces of my websites, but if there's some kind of driver, someone reported a problem, that would prompt me to log in.
Yeah, social engineering via phone, email. Hey, I can't get to so-and-so.
Exactly.
Can you check the firewall? And
Exactly
you don't know
that.
how many times I was in a support organization, even though it wasn't the firewall, I was required to check the damn firewall.
So yeah, exactly that. And imagine, with that kind of simple social engineering tricks, you don't only looking at web server admins, you're also thinking about support team, right? So you created a ticket, you put a cross-site scripting on your username, you put a cross-site scripting in somewhere. Maybe in support you don't have to generally trigger them, but there is another way. For example, support generally can log in as someone else. So in theory, you can even do crazy attacks such as put a cross-site scripting on your profile that only you can see, and then convince a support to check your account. And if they are using one of those systems where the support can log in as a user, then it will get executed, but you are still in that support session. Now you can log in as anyone because support got that privilege.
That's awesome.
So this is effectively blind cross-site scripting. In practice, you can do a couple of other things, but what you need to keep in mind, you need a public internet-facing web server that can accept HTTP requests. So that's crucial.
And clearly, that's incredibly difficult nowadays to get. I speak facetiously.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Right. So let's go and continue moving away from blind cross-site scripting. Before I continue to another exploitation, I just want to, take a step back and talk about how you set up this environment without going into too much details, but giving enough information so, whomever is watching, they can just easily replicate this and do their own testing. So we talked about HTTP server, but in practice, if we are talking about server-side vulnerabilities, we want DNS over HTTP. And there's an obvious reason for it, obviously. In general, if we run into any kind of egress filtering, it won't include DNS. DNS is like one of the most overlooked protocols, and because of the nature, it can go through a couple of other internal systems. Therefore, even if you have egress filtering for outside of your network, you can still exfiltrate that data through DNS. So I would say it's the most reliable method. But if you are talking about cross-site scripting, go for HTTP. So the client side, you're generally looking at for HTTPS protocol. And HTTPS is actually better, which I kind of ignored to simplify this example. HTTPS is important because today's modern browsers, if you try to make an HTTP request from an HTTPS domain, HTTPS website, a connection, it will be blocked, which is a good thing. But as an attacker, that means you want to put your web server in a way where it can accept HTTPS. And generally, you want let's encrypt kind of valid certificate, because unless you got a valid certificate, then again, it won't work. So in real world, the exploitation gets complicated, and you really, really need a setup right there to do this kind of things. And test it beforehand in different environments.
I know Joff is thinking the same thing that a lot of us are thinking, right? I would just set up a Python backend to trap all of these requests coming back to me, right, Joff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the other thing, though. It's not as bad as you might think, because command and control infrastructures are relatively easy to set up now with the ubiquitous nature of cloud providers and the fact that you can generate certificate requests from public CAs, just like you said, for Let's Encrypt, for example, and very, very quickly have legitimate certificate infrastructures. So there's a lot more agility in standing up command and control very quickly these days.
Oh yeah. Actually, if you do this daily, this is exactly what you want. You need a proper HTTP server set up with some logging, some notification, and an easy web interface that you can just check, rather than like a shell interface that you have to tail or watch.
Right, exactly. I agree.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I will talk about the HTTP server, I just go with Apache or whatever, just something. It doesn't matter really. But I will mostly talk about how can you have your DNS setup, which is kind of more complicated. Because you want a custom DNS server that answers to your request, then logs those requests, and it should be wildcard kind of DNS server. So answers everything, then logs everything, then you can see, so you can exfiltrate data. What you need a domain name. You need to set up your NS records to point your server IP address. And again, obviously, server needs to be the public, accessible, all that. And then you need a DNS server. In here, actually, there's a really good server. I'm skipping these bits where you set up your NS, etc. And, people can pause and read these slides in more details. But yes, this is the critical bit. There is a really nice tool from SpiderLabs called Responder. And I'll show you how it works.
We love Responder.
Right. I'm sure you guys mostly used in network kind of exploitation, maybe. It's also very useful for this purpose. You can just, use the DNS Responder part of it and just log DNS requests, which is very nice.
Awesome.
Which I'm going to do very soon. So, in our demo, we have a server setup, something like this, and it doesn't work at the moment because we don't have a DNS Responder running. So let's run that. So I'm just running the DNS Responder. Now it's running, it's listening, so I'm going to put it right. And then if I do a random request, I should be seeing something like ASD, and that goes. Right, so it's all good, it's working. So now what we want to do, in this time, instead of a cross-site scripting, we will look at the SQL injection example. So let's switch to that domain. We have a domain like this, and we have let me take my notes, sorry, not here.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Almost there. Yeah, I found it. Right. Okay. So this is like an out-of-bounds SQL injection, but here's the parameter I know that's vulnerable. I put stuff, I put single quotes, I can put so many things, I know none of them works. It doesn't wait, it doesn't sleep, right? It doesn't make me make the response longer. I can't do that. I can't make it an error, give an error. I can't do something like Boolean SQL injection. I can't do true, false conditions and change the response. Response is always same, independent of the attack. However, I know for a fact there's a SQL injection. So I can do an attack and I will get a response, but I'm not going to be able to see it. So I need an out-of-band ways of checking that attack actually got worked. And this is a Postgres, and obviously in real world, and as you know, Paul, we discussed this before slightly in one of the previous shows, that in a real world application, you don't even know the database. You might guess, you can say, okay, this is a PHP environment. I'm possibly looking at MySQL or Postgres, or maybe Oracle, quite unlikely. So you can kind of limit your attack possibilities, but you still need to do so many attacks to get that right. So I'm going to skip that part where you blindly brute forcing your way into a successful SQL injection. And that's why, on those kind of things, I always say you got to automate. I'm going to skip that part. I'm going to dive right into a successful exploitation. So I will explain the payload first.
This is where in a red team you throw the white card, the white flag, or the red card rather, white card rather, and that you get the quote, the next step that you assume breach.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking the same thing, Larry. It's funny you say that. Yeah.
The assume breach.
Let us go find the SQL injection and then show you how it's executed like Ferruh shown. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
It's one of those, hey, we can do all this stuff and we can do this and it's going to take us like 3 days, but we've got a 2-day assessment type of thing.
Right,
So
right. No,
we can do this.
It's going to take us 3 weeks or however long an attacker would take to figure this out.
Right.
We've got 3 days or 2 days.
Right, or
Yeah.
a week or whatever. And this is very much, and that's at the white card event type of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, we had a running joke about it. We used to say if we come into an issue where we know it's kind of exploitable, but we don't have enough time in that pen testing engagement, we used to say a better attacker would have done it. So it's one of those scenarios.
And that's all a matter of how you frame the language, right? Better attacker. No. A better attacker would have taken their time and would have gone completely under the radar because they've got all the time in the world.
Right.
Yeah. Or they have potentially
Exactly.
all the time in the world that they're not constrained by time in many of the cases. I mean, you think about the whole thing with Stuxnet. How much time did they have? They had years to make this happen.
Yeah. And that's a great example.
And,
it is.
We're typically going in and doing a test. And if it's a pen test, it's a week. And if it's, maybe a red team engagement, it's a month. And quite honestly, a month is not an accurate. For someone that's determined against a particular industry, a month is not long enough.
Segue very quickly. An attacker has a lot of. So if it takes them a month to execute one phase of an attack, well, that's a month. I go spend. I do other things. I build my botnet. I do some other things.
Yeah.
I trade some Bitcoin. I do some ransomware attacks. Like I'm keeping myself occupied in that month.
Diversify.
Yeah, I keep myself occupied in that month, and then I come back to that attack. And so, okay, sorry.
Bing.
Go ahead, Ferruh.
No, actually, on that point, you're definitely right. The attacker got time, and also they don't have the scope limitation, right? They don't care whether they're over the scope or not. That such a concept doesn't exist for them. And maybe something I quite like on the attacker end. Attacker can, if they want, if they really after a particular, let's say, web application website. What they can do, which is a method I really like in the application of it, they can actually create an inventory of the application. And today's applications, we have like 30 dependencies. Okay, so you got the server components, you got the web application components, the JavaScript libraries, internal, external, CDNs, etc. And then once you have all that, then you just sit. Let's say you're not that skillful attacker. Let's say you can't find your 0 days. Let's say, you're just effectively script kiddie. You can still create this inventory, right? You know what your target has. Then all you need to do is sit and wait for a 0 day and be faster than the defender. That's it. It doesn't take anything more than that. You just wait to find a 0 day in one of those 30-something components. And once someone dropped that to public, now you need to be just faster than the defender's patch. And in real world, we know, especially if you are patching a client-side JavaScript or something, or some other web application library, no one is going to do it in an hour. So it's going to take days, even months. Sometimes not even that. They simply won't fix it, patch it. So that's something also attackers are going for them. So going back to our SQL injection, so the tricky bit in this SQL injection, or the interesting bit more like it, this is what we do. We use a DB link connect. In Postgres, this is what's going to do. This is going to connect to another server. And this is exactly what we want. So if we are looking at the other database, relational database server that we would be doing SQL injection, we got similar functions. The key bit of the function, you want that function to make a DNS request. And on Windows environments, this gets easier because you got UNC share model. But if you are on a Linux environment, then what you need to do, you need a function, something like that. For example, MySQL in Linux, there is just no known way to do a DNS request. But in all other major databases, we have one. So in this one, what I'm going to do, we will doing a DB link connect. Other than I'm skipping the escape, then we are concatenating strings. Then what we do, DB link connect, but where host equals, okay, here's my actual injection. I'm trying to extract the password from the users table, and I'm interested in a particular ID. Obviously, this could have been something like role equals admin, more precise. selection, and then this is my domain. So what this will produce, it will produce a DNS query, something like this, password.meetup.me, right? And then on my listener, now I'm getting random scans now. In my listener, I'm gonna see password, right? That's what I'm looking for. So let's do that. So the listener in here, and we will put our injection in here. We are waiting. Oh, there it goes. So here is the password, and you can see the DNS query coming to us. Ignore the first dot, it's just a DNS format, right? FQDN format. And this is really long password is the execution of, let's go from the payload again. So I will show where it exactly. So this piece got executed. It produced this, and then append the domain name itself so we can get that. Again, just like cross-site scripting, this can be immediate. If it's immediate, it can be, for example, async execution. In this example, it's immediate. Or it can be second order. It's happening through by, going through various layers. Or it can be just like blind XSS. It only gets executed when someone sees a certain interface, when someone creates a log report, something like that. But the good thing about this, if you think about SQL injection, how you can detect that, this is literally the most reliable detection, because to go over the common detection, the first thing you will be looking something like, okay, am I getting an error? No. So the second thing you are looking, okay, what if I do and 1 equals 1 and then and 1 equals 0, am I getting different results? No. Then you will say, what if I use PG sleep? Is it responding with 10 seconds later? No. But you can still do the DNS kind of out of band attack and see it's still vulnerable. In a normal pen tester, after second or third try, they're going to give up. It's just too much effort for something you have no idea, you have no indicator whether you are getting somewhere or not. So this is effectively, you can have your responder with SpiderLabs responder, very straightforward. And again, you can have your fancy DNS server as well, set up an actual DNS server if you like, and then you can look at the logs, but this will be significantly easier to do. So this was effectively the SQL injection demo. And one thing I want to also mention, this is something we have done in our tool, right? In Netsparker, we built something called Netsparker Hawk that automates this process and helps out to, the whole this process, which is quite useful, mostly because of the reasons I've said. As a penetration tester, you guys mentioned about just before I joined in, I was watching the show, and there was the talk about AI and how human can do stuff and automation cannot do, which is perfectly right. And something I always say, there are certain things only a human can do. So as a penetration tester, as a security guard, you have to focus those things. And there are things you can automate, and you really shouldn't spend your time on the things you can automate. But also you need to understand what is actually automation can deliver, what is the limitation, what is the possibility, so you're not missing anything. So I will also... Without going into details, I just want to make a quick demo of how this can be done in an automated fashion.
No, and I think it's a great point, Ferruh. Joff and I and others were talking about, we just code a Python server to do all this stuff, and as we all know, that can get out of control. And while even the pen testers of the world can automate this stuff to a certain point, I also think that those of us that are defending an organization, if I'm in the defender role and I'm I want to have the server out on the internet, and I want to write my own Python server, and I want to pipe our data from our internal pen test out to the server on the internet, they're going to be like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. So having the facility within products like Netsparker to do this, I think, is really important.
Exactly. I know from my experience, like as a penetration tester or as someone trying to secure an organization, you just want to spend your time on the valuable things. And again, instead of setting up your DNS server, you want to go something like SpiderLabs because it's straightforward, it's easy. You don't want to deal with all that complexity. And the very same idea. In Netsparker, we got that server we called Hawk. And before you go ahead and do this, you can just check, okay, the SSL is working, DNS records are working, everything can access, be good to go. And you can also deploy your own Docker. So Docker DNS server, Hawk version. So all you need to do, again, just install that Docker and type that your own domain name to here and validate, and you're good to go. So in Netsparker, I'm just typing the SQL injection that we found in here. Where was it? Yeah, here. And then I'm just going to start scan. I optimized the policy so it will be super quick. In a real application, there will be more attacks. It will be slightly slower. So it just, I enabled the audio. Right. It just finished the scan, and it will report it as out-of-band SQL injection and slightly more complicated payload here than what we used. And here is the actual exploit attack using the Netsparker Hawk servers. And again, if this was a blind SQL injection or a SQL injection, blind cross-site scripting, or a SQL injection that might execute it not now, but 10 minutes later down the line, it will still catch that. And on the cloud, it's even more dynamic and real time. You don't have to check anything. You don't have to do anything. Once the DNS server catches that response, it will immediately inform the scan and it will attach it to the scan. So this is pretty much what I prepared as a demo, as the subject. And I don't know whether you guys have any questions, any particular comments on that, other than what we discussed already.
No, I think it's fantastic. I think you gave some great tips for pen testers and others that are, more advanced. And I think that, having that in your product that just kind of works is really awesome. I love using the Netsparker products actually to scan our own websites. I think it's great. And to have that functionality that just kind of works to create the infrastructure already to trap some of these attacks is really great. So, Ferruh, thank you very much for all the wonderful information. And I hope everyone enjoyed this technical segment. Ferruh, again, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, anytime. With that, we're going to take a short break, come back and talk about our security news for this week. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.